Okay, so can you guys hear me? Or do I have to go like this? Okay, so I'm going to start us off today, a little bit of an introduction. My name's Jesse Green. I'm a science teacher at Tantasqua Junior High in Fiskdale. And I just want to thank you for coming out today to the Monson Library to hear about a project that we've started a few years back and that will continue to go on indefinitely until we have success. So there's no end date for this project, and it's a long-term project. It could be a 10-year affair or a 20, or Lois from the American Chestnut Foundation says it could be who knows how long. So it's a big experiment. I just want to say I'm here also with my colleague Kristen Daly, who's also a science teacher, and she was here somewhere. Oh, there she is in the back, and you'll see her later. And I also want to acknowledge to a third, 7th grade science teacher from Tantasqua, Cassie Amadeo, and all three of us together work to teach ecology through the American Chestnut, Tantasqua Chestnut Project, which focuses on American chestnuts and the lessons that the American chestnut tree has to teach. So we're here not only because we're doing a really cool project, but we want to share with you something that's really special that we discovered on the top of Mount Ella, which is up in Flynt Park, right behind the library. There's actually a forest of American chestnut trees, which are, if you know anything about the chestnut tree, you might know that they're nearly extinct. They're not quite extinct. They're what we call functionally extinct. But on the top of that mountain, there's a high-density stand of American chestnuts, not the way they used to be, but quite possibly about to make a historic comeback. And the really neat thing is that the comeback has been triggered by the tornado that came through Monson on June 1st, 2011. So tonight's presentation is going to start with my account of the June 1st tornado. And because I was at home when it happened, and it did not wreck my house, but I was here, took lots of pictures, and I'm going to try to explain how the triggering of the American chestnut comeback happened because of the tornado, how it relates to our project. After that, 7th grade students who are participants in the project will follow by teaching you about the really significant history of the American chestnut and also its really significant demise. The demise of the American chestnut is termed by authorities as the worst ecological disaster that ever has happened in history in North America and maybe even the world. And the fact that it happened so long ago is why it's out of some of our common memory, and so it's something important to keep in mind, especially in this day and age when ecology is such a hot topic. After the 7th grade, Mrs. Daly will provide some context about the 100 years effort to save the tree from extinction, and also how Tantasqua and Monson fit into the 100 years effort. Following Mrs. Daly, we have 8th and 9th grade students who are participants on this side of the room. They're going to show you how we've been involved in working to save the American chestnut tree, what we've been doing at Flynt Park, and also at school. And then lastly, we'll close with Lois Bro-Melican, who's standing in the back at the moment, and she's the president of the Massachusetts Rhode Island chapter of the American Chestnut Foundation. She and her husband, Dennis, have been coming to our school for the past 2.5 years every single week to mentor us through this project and make sure that we can accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. And she's going to describe the unique opportunity that there is in Monson to bring back a piece of not only American history, but also a significant piece of Monson history that is in Flynt Park. So we hope that you are entertained by the presentation, especially that you learn a lot. And in the end, hopefully you will also become inspired to be involved in some way in this project as it continues to grow in our school and also in the town of Monson. So thank you very much, and we will start with me after I make it go forward. So I said I took all the pictures. I didn't actually take this one. So this is a picture of the tornado coming across Flynt Park. As far as I can see, it's actually on top of Mount Ella at the moment that the person who shot this picture took it. This picture is taken somewhere over by Westview Farms Creamery on the opposite side of the hill. And it's significant because at this moment, like the triggering of this possibility of an American chestnut comeback in Monson is starting. Like this is, somebody caught it on camera. I happen to be in my house at the time. This is the back of my house, and I live at the base of the Mount Ella Flynt Park, where the driveway, the entrance to Flynt Park is. And I was hanging around in my basement, and I heard wind and hissing sounds, and you know, the TV was turned up really loud so we could hear it downstairs until the power went out, and my kid was playing on a little rolly toy on the floor, oblivious. And it's kind of funny because I remember opening the door and seeing this tree that had come down and thinking, oh my God, a tree fell in our yard. And obviously I had no idea what was waiting for me to see downtown. We came outside and walked around a little bit after it had passed. The neighbors were walking around, and it really, like the extent of the damage and impact on our town and the other towns that were also impacted, I had no idea. I remember we loaded up my kid into a stroller, and we took a little walk down the sidewalk, and we started to get close to just up here where the First Church is, and somebody drove by in a car, and they said, the tower of the church is gone. And I remember thinking, I thought they were kidding, you know, like I didn't really know. And we went a little further, and then it seemed dangerous, like there was a power line down. I mean, it's very small beans, you know, compared to everything else. But we went home. We turned around. I'm like, maybe we shouldn't go out with a stroller in this. So we went home, and we went to bed, and it was dark because there was no power, and we slept all night and still really didn't know. And I can't believe it went on that long with not knowing. But anyway, a little bit embarrassed, to tell you the truth. A little embarrassed. I did get a phone call from my sister raving about, you know, what it was like, but she's raves about a lot of things, so I didn't know how much to believe. So in the morning, though, I remember waking up. It was very early, and just got light out, and all you could hear was helicopters. And I thought, you know, I need to get up and get out there, and I need to find out what happened because obviously something's wrong. And when I did, oh, there's the helicopter. That probably was the one. The governor showed up in that. I didn't actually see the guy, but I saw his helicopter. But this is like the first big piece of the disaster that I saw. It was the tower of the church right across the street, laying down in the grass there, and that's really weird. That's my church too. So you look at it and you think it's just very strange to see. And you know, there's the clock. Time stopped. And then this is right across the street. The house you guys saw it today. The house with the giraffes. That's the people's car who lived there, sideways against the tree. And it's still, you know, it's like hitting me more and more that this is like really more than I thought it was. My little tree in my yard that fell down, who cares? It's not a big deal. And then my next thing was, you know, I have friends that live downtown, parents of my friends that live downtown. I want to go down there and see who's okay and make sure everything's all right. And this is what it looked like. This was probably 6 o'clock in the morning, on the morning after the tornado, and the police were there. They wouldn't let me go downtown, and I sort of decided that I was going to find another way. Don't do what I do, just do what I say. Yeah, you know. So I kind of backtracked around, and I saw this again. That's my wife and my first son. They weren't there then. And I found out the only way I was going to make it into town was to follow the train tracks. So I started walking down the tracks, and then I got to this, you know, totally impassable, branches all over the place. I had to climb over this thing. Got onto the top of it, actually got stuck. It doesn't look like that big of a pile, but actually got stuck up in here. And there was two guys that I didn't see down in the brush, and they're like, hey, why don't you come over this way? It's much easier. So I go down, and there's like a little tunnel that had formed during the night, people trying to get from one place to another. So I snuck through a tunnel and came out the other side. But when your town gets turned into like places where you have to sneak through tunnels to get places, it's a very strange thing. And it was very quiet. And this is State Street looking south. And there was power lines, and you're just actually stepping over them. Things you didn't think you would do, but you're kind of stuck there in it. And it was just, I remember that it was very quiet and very strange, and there were people around, but they weren't talking to each other, and they were just kind of wandering and looking. And then you start seeing like people who actually had problems at their house, not like my house, and like that's somebody's house. And there's somebody else's house. And the crazy thing is my friend who lived next door bought that house the day before, closed on his house the day before, and we spent a week cutting a path just to get to his house through here. It was crazy. Couldn't even get up there. Here's another house. And I could tell you all kinds of excerpts, but the reason I'm showing these things is because this was a really terrible disaster. And if you lived in Monson, you already know this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But in disasters, there always seems to be a silver lining at times, which the Chestnut Project is one. So that's the parents of my best friend. That's the house, which obviously is not there. And there's another one across the street. This lady, I think it was this house, they found her checkbook in Newton. Isn't that crazy? So if you look across the hill, this is Flynt Park. This is the picture where the tornado was coming across the hill. And, of course, I didn't know that years later I'd be up there with all these kids and other teachers from my school doing really, really neat things. But the tornado changed the forests around Monson, not just the places that people lived. I mean, this is up on Eli Road. Look at these trees. They're just like ripped to shreds, trunks twisted and splintered into toothpicks. And I remember going to a meeting, and I forget who it was, a forester from somewhere in Massachusetts telling people don't go into the woods. It's really dangerous. There's lots of branches that are bent down, and they can spring up in your face, unexpectedly, and stay out of the woods. And because of things like that, the town of Monson at some point contracted to clear off the woods that covered Flynt Park. And so here's a picture after a lot of work has been done there, and you can tell it's in the winter time, but it's really a barren, looks like a barren slate. There's nothing there except a few remnant trees. It almost looks like there's no ground cover at all. But a few years after it looked like that, I went on a walk to the top of Flynt Park, and everything had started to grow back, and I started noticing trees that look like this. So this is an American chestnut tree. And, I had learned some things in college about American chestnut trees, not very much. I used to be a teacher at Chestnut Hill Community School in Belchertown, and by working there, I learned some more. So at this point, I knew what they looked like. But the thing that was really throwing me off is that this is a functionally extinct, on the way out species. Maybe you're lucky if you find some somewhere. But the entire mountain, and I'm saying the whole entire summit and all the way down the slopes of Mount Ella is covered with, I'm going to say, thousands and thousands of American chestnut trees. And I'm like, could they be American chestnut? They look like it, but there shouldn't be this many. I don't know. I didn't know enough about it. So to make a long story short, it kept nagging at me, and it was really nagging because the time that I took this walk was the same time in the school year that we used the American chestnut story to teach about ecology. And so some students every year always say, isn't there something we can do? Isn't there something we can do? And the basic answer was really dissatisfying every year. yeah, people have been trying to do things for 100 years or more, and, you know, are they making progress? I don't know, but it's maybe a bigger project than a bunch of kids in junior high can handle. And so for a few years, that was like what we told kids. But when I saw this stand of trees like in the path of that tornado, I just couldn't believe it. So I sent an email. It was like a blind email out to the American Chestnut Foundation. And luckily, the foundation, someone from the foundation got right back to me. And my question was, can we do anything, you know, with kids at school involving American chestnut trees and trying to help the situation? And the answer was, let's come and have a meeting at school. So they came, and it was a funny meeting because I said that we wanted to help, and they said, what can you do? And I said, I don't know. And then I said, what do you think we could do? And they said, I don't know. And nobody knew anything. So that was 2.5 years ago, and we've been like building it up for a while now. And we have a pretty clear picture at this point in what we can do as junior high teachers and students. And I think you're going to find out that what it is really something significant. Lois from the American Chestnut Foundation says that we're the only school group of this age level in the entire United States who has done anything close to what we have done between Tantasqua Junior High and the land and chestnut trees at Flynt Park. So shortly after, you know, are they really chestnut trees was the first question. So we had to go and get samples, and right from the get-go, students were involved with every step that we had to do. This was one of the first days up there, learning how to identify chestnut trees and picking samples out to be sent to a field station in Vermont for positive ID. There's Lois right there. She's checking out a good sample, and it was kind of a waiting game. Are they real? Are they mixes? Are they something we can do? And it turns out they're all pure, 100% American chestnut trees. No one has ever found, in all the samples we sent, none of the samples were any kind of hybrid or anything else. They're pure trees. Next thing was, do they actually flower? Because flowering is what's important for our project. And so we looked for signs of flowering, because it was the spring, which could be seeing flowers, or it could also be seeing remnants of last year's flowering. So on his finger is a burr. The burr has 3 seeds, which means that they do flower. So that's why it was like, that was an exciting day, because we just kept finding out good news. Yep, they're the right kind of tree. Yeah, there's a ton of them. They have flowered. And then we actually saw the flowers a couple weeks later, and then we were on our way. So just one thing I have to say before we go any further. A lot of people have some confusion between American chestnut and horse chestnut. The top picture shows American chestnut leaves and burrs and twigs and seeds. The bottom is the horse chestnut. And so you can see from just the picture of the leaf itself, there's a whole different arrangement on the stem. The shapes of the actual leaflets are a little bit different. And so we like to just throw that out there. Not to burst your bubble, but you might have American chestnuts, but you also might have horse chestnuts. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to 7th grade. So I hope you enjoy it. You guys are going to do an excellent job. And first up, we have Rita.
Hi, I'm Rita. So I was just going to tell you a little bit about what these trees once were. They were these huge, it's like almost unimaginable. You can see in those pictures, they're people right there. Like those are like actual people. It's like these trees were the mighty giants, the redwoods of the East. But they weren't just big. They were like this super tree. They had and there's all sorts of things that are special about them. Their wood, their nuts, they were just this dominant. They were helpful for the people living around them and the animals. And so they were like this keystone species that was just like I don't know. So, and now like other people in our group will tell you a little bit more about those specific things and details about that. Okay, who's next on this?
Hi. Hi, I'm Sierra, and this is Eleanor. So about a little history about where the chestnut trees actually were. They started around about southern Maine and went all the way down to like northern Georgia area. And they were just everywhere. They were so important during the 1800s for everyone. They were the best things for us. They provided so much for us.
So a little bit more about the size of the tree. It was about 20 feet taller than the regular canopy today, and it grew to about 100 feet, and the width of it was the size of a grown man's arm span. So yeah, it's pretty big.
Hi, my name is Kira. So the American chestnut was, like Ella and Sierra said, one of the biggest trees. And because of this, a lot of animals like the chestnuts, they were able to like live there. Like the gray tree frog, like to go in the canopy of the tree and just live there. And then some of the animals, like squirrels and bears and deer, they ate the chestnuts out of the burrs. But then something happened to the chestnuts that made them start dying, and the chestnuts started going away. So that was some of the animals' main food source. So they started going away. So the primary consumers were gone, the secondary consumers were gone, and everything started going away. Well, mostly everything.
Hi, I'm Grace, and not only did the chestnuts provide food for animals, they also provided a lot of like sources for people. In the left corner, you can see that people are roasting chestnuts, and they roasted chestnuts for pleasure and also for good money. In this picture, you can see that a farmer is gathering chestnuts to sell. And like how many people go apple picking, like with their families and stuff, right? And that corner, you can see boys getting chestnuts so they can sell them, and they're kind of going chestnut picking. And one boy is bashing a burr open so he can get the chestnut, and the other one is throwing a stick in a tree to get the burrs. And not only like the chestnuts were also like a free food for the livestock of the farmers. And so like the farmers didn't really have to go out and get food. They could just get the chestnuts.
Hi, I'm Arthur. Another valuable thing that the chestnut trees provided was strong, rot-resistant, lightweight hardwood for the people of the time. At the time, they were used for telephone poles, railroads, frames for buildings, and beams for buildings. And they were shipped across America for similar use since they were such valuable wood. At that time, for large amounts of chestnut wood, it wasn't quite expensive to buy several cords, and now small pieces can cost a lot of money. And the pictures, it shows some of the common uses at the time for wood, and the lumber. In the lower left corner, it would show how people could earn money by harvesting large amounts of wood, because since the trees were so large, they could harvest large amounts of wood just by cutting one tree down. And at the time, they built fences and houses and those most of those frames still last today, since the wood has so many properties that no other type of wood has. And well, it shows that on the train that they're shipping lumber through America, and also that the railroad tracks were probably made of chestnuts, speaking that they would last longer, causing less repairs to things at the time.
Good evening, I'm Madeline Peterson. So after what you have just heard from my other peers, you concluded that the American chestnuts became important and popular to many people in the U.S. In 1945, Nat King Cole wrote a Christmas song. During the song, the lyrics, "Chestnuts roasting on an open fire," came into play. Many artists added chestnuts to their lyrics because chestnuts were popular around the holiday. Many people named roads, avenues, streets, etc. after the chestnuts. When we go up to Flynt Park, the road we actually take to get up to the mountain is called Chestnut Avenue. So adding to the previous statement I said earlier, when chestnuts were popular around the holiday, many people use chestnuts in different recipes. For example, roasted chestnuts, chestnut stuffing, chestnut soup, and many more other recipes. This gives you a little idea of how chestnuts were valued by all people. So as you can see in the thing, in the top, right here, this is like people roasting chestnuts during the holidays. This is Mount Ella. Down here is where we usually park, and we take, a pathway up to the top of it to get to our chestnuts. And this is how people came up with it. So literally in the whole, you've probably been to many other, states and stuff like that, and you might have seen chestnuts, like streets named after chestnuts and stuff like that. And so it became pretty popular of how they just named everything after the chestnuts because how they became so popular.
Hi, I'm Ella, and I'll be telling you what happened to the chestnuts. So suddenly around 1911, the American chestnut trees began to fall. Gigantic trees crashed to the ground, causing havoc to the ecosystem. These trees that were valued by so many people disappeared from view, destroying forests all over the northeastern United States. Forests once filled with hundreds of American chestnuts were left with just their fallen remains. But what was behind this ecological disaster?
Hi, I'm Dale. Well, this all kind of started in the Bronx Zoo. They love to have, well, it's a zoo obviously, so they have a lot of exotic exhibits and things that they wanted to keep there, things that they were importing from other places. And they had an exotic plant exhibit, which they had brought in, the Chinese chestnut. They had brought it to show, and people haven't seen this before because it comes from China. So, well, what happened was that they didn't really know what they had brought over, because when you bring something from another country that's more adapted to their place and bring it to here, a lot of things can happen. And then in the summer of 1904, there were a lot of cases, scattered cases of American chestnuts getting diseases and becoming sick, and falling. So, yeah.
My name is Corbin, and I will be telling you about what tragically ended the chestnuts' common being what ended the chestnut forests. Originally, this was a fungus called Cryphonectria parasitica, and it is orange in color and sort of spotty looking. And the way it works, it wraps around the base of the trunk of a chestnut tree, and just chokes off the nutrients and the water to make it to the rest of the tree, which then slowly splinters the wood apart at the base, and it eventually falls over and rots and dies. But then this fungus is also airborne, meaning that even if they clear-cut multiple forests to stop the disease from, in theory, spreading, it was able to travel in the air and make it to other chestnut trees. And because the fungus only wrapped around the base of the tree, there were actually still roots of chestnut trees in the ground. This is actually what made it able for us to revive the trees in Flynt Park and, in theory, help our cause. The roots are still, so because the roots are alive, chestnut trees are able to grow up every now and then, but they're smaller and weaker.
Hi, my name is Alex, and I'll be telling you where and how the blight started from. It started in New York in 1904, and in 50 years, about 4 million trees died. The death of the trees started panic across the east coast of the United States. A couple ways they tried to stop the fungus. They tried to cut wide paths between trees in Pennsylvania and tried to stop it from spreading so that it wouldn't affect the other trees. And then finally, genetics figured out a way to beat the blight and try to save the trees.
Hi, I'm Corey, and so they're called ghost forests because, like my peer said, the blight is airborne, so it only goes in the air, but wouldn't go into the soil. So the roots are still alive, and so the trees would keep growing, but they wouldn't grow long enough, so they'd just be like little shrubs, and so they wouldn't be able to grow this the seeds to repopulate, so they're functionally extinct. But they're so small, so no one sees that they're American chestnuts growing around. So that's why they're called ghost forest.
Hi, I'm Kristen Daly, and I am also a 7th grade science teacher with Jesse Green. First of all, before I say anything else, I just want to say that our 7th graders that just spoke, with the exception of Maddie, who's an 8th grader, they've only been learning about this for the last month or so. This is their first speaking engagement, and they were nervous, but I just want to say you guys did a great job, so I'm very proud of you. So as Jesse said, as all of this is happening, as far as the American Chestnut Foundation and Tantasqua and Monson, we just kept getting good news. Everything just kept falling into place. And once we met Lois and Dennis and we learned more about everything that had been going on, we learned a little bit about the history of the work of the American Chestnut Foundation. So for over 30 years, they've been trying to work with restoring the American chestnut tree. And they've been doing that by trying to cross what the Chinese chestnut tree that was originally brought to the Bronx Zoo had the fungus growing on it, but the tree was immune to it. And our American chestnut trees were not immune to this invasive species. So they started by crossing the Chinese chestnut, which had the blight-resistant gene, with the American chestnut that did not have it, and they continued to work to what they call back crossing it. They eventually got trees that were 15/16 American chestnut tree. So mostly American, but they still had some of those genes of the Chinese chestnut tree. So this process had been going on a long time with the American Chestnut Foundation, but we were now just another puzzle piece in how this all came together. So after we had met with Lois and Dennis and the Chestnut Foundation, we're kind of still trying to figure out how are we going to make this work and how are we going to involve the kids in it, because that was our ultimate goal, was how can we take their passion for wanting to do something and make a change and make it all work. So we decided to make what we called the Chestnut Club, and it started out a couple of years ago. The students that were in that are now in 9th grade, and they're still active as ever with everything that we're doing. So we formed this club where it's not the teachers doing the work, it's not the American Chestnut Foundation doing the work, it's the 7th, 8th, and 9th graders that are actually out there doing public speaking, doing field work, doing management in wildlife management up on Monson on Mount Ella. So many good things have come from all of this coming together. Hold a second. So like I said, everything came into it just all worked out. We now have 3 generations of Chestnut Club kids that are all here tonight. And how we're involved in this. So the American Chestnut Foundation, I had told you they have already back-crossed trees, and they have made a blight-resistant tree. But our part in it is that we want to make it what we call, and this is actually my favorite sentence to say, is we're trying to create a regionally adapted blight-resistant American chestnut tree. And what that means is, so in Virginia, where the American Chestnut Foundation's kind of headquarters is, their blight-resistant trees are working, but we need to start breeding it with trees that grow in Massachusetts, because obviously the weather is different, the climate is different, so we need to have it so that it's regionally adapted and that they can grow around here. So as Jesse mentioned in the beginning of his talk, that while the tornado was horrible and those pictures were just devastating, there is a silver lining to it. And that's what we're here to kind of bring to you today, of how this tragedy is actually turning into something that can eventually be good. So it was a rare find to find those flowering chestnuts up on Mount Ella. And together with the American Chestnut Foundation, and everyone here in Monson and Flynt Park, we're able to all collaborate to try to restore the functionally extinct American chestnut tree. We also, last year, started a research orchard at our school. So you're going to hear about some of our field work in a minute, but we were able to we pollinated trees in Monson at Flynt Park with pollen that we got from the American Chestnut Foundation that was blight resistant in order to make those regionally adapted trees, and we collected the seeds and we planted them back here at our school. So we are trying to grow them. We have several trees growing, and you're going to hear about the whole story of that in a minute. All right, so I'm going to hand this over to Olivia. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Olivia Roy, and step 1 in our process was pre-bagging. In the process, we tagged American chestnut trees that really resembled their species, meaning trees that didn't have blight yet, were a decent size, and produced a good amount of female flowers. To bag the female flowers, we used paper bags and zip ties as shown in this picture. Working together, we all had a different job. We pre-bagged female flowers of those strong, pre-identified trees. First, we found the right tree, then grabbed a limb carefully. We cut off all the male flowers to make sure the trees didn't pollinate themselves. Someone then would number the bag and put the bag over the female flowers. We numbered the bags to keep track of the amount of clusters of bagged female flowers that were on each tree. After, someone would put a zip tie on, making sure not to zip it over the precious flowers. Overall, we did this to make sure the other male flowers would not be able to pollinate the female flowers that we were going to be pollinating.
Hi, so I'm Becca, not Olivia, she is sick. But I'm going to tell you about the second part of our field work process, which was pollinating. So to create a chestnut tree that is resistant to blight, we first had to crossbreed the American chestnut tree with the chestnut tree, as well as with the pollen that we got from the American Chestnut Foundation. To do this, we were given samples of pollen from the orchard in Virginia. that were 15/16 American chestnut and 1/16 Chinese chestnut. My phone just shut off, and that's really inconvenient. So to pollinate the burrs, we would take the branches and rub them against some glass slides that we had put pollen on. And we made sure we were very delicate because we don't want to break it and ruin everything. And then we would bag them back up in the same bags that Olivia had talked about in pre-bagging, as well as some burrs that we didn't pollinate, just as a sort of safety test to make sure they weren't pollinating themselves. So now here's my slide, the harvesting slide. So the third part of our field work was the actual harvesting. This happened late September, early October, and was when we went back to Flynt Park to remove the bags, which you can see all of our towel people did there. They pulled down the trees so we could carefully unwrap the bags and the zip ties, cut off the burrs, which now look like this because they're all pollinated and beautiful. And a few of them we cracked open to see the nuts and see what they looked like, and to make sure that the nuts inside had actually grown to what we want them to look like. We also opened up the test bags to make sure that they were still not pollinated, which if they came out looking green and beautiful like this, that means we had to put them in the mutt nut pile because they couldn't be used, because there was the chance that the pollen that had pollinated them could have also infected our chestnuts, and we didn't want that. So we sorted all of our nuts that we had harvested by the ones we liked and our mutt nuts, but we took our mutt nuts and we made ice cream with it, and it tasted really good, so silver lining. All right.
Hi, I'm Lily Audette, also part of the American Chestnut Foundation, obviously. After harvesting the nuts, which one's the laser? Okay. After harvesting the nuts, what we had to do is break them open at the school. The seeds inside are very delicate, but the burrs are hard and spiny, so we had to break them open practically by any means necessary. It was a difficult process. Some of them would come open by ripping them open. They were pretty easy, but some of them we'd had to either use a knife kind of thing or stepping on. Some of them worked, but we had to still be very careful to not damage the seeds. We used gloves because the spines on them were obviously very pokey, and they could easily be lodged in the skin. And after getting the seeds out of them, we had to eventually transport them to the freezer. To do this, we would take the seeds and put them in a bed of peat moss. We had to take the seeds, and this little thing on the seed right here, this white part, is the start of the root, also known as the radicle. And we had to place the radicle side up in the flat side of the nut, the seed down, so the radicle side would stick up, so it would have an easy time to shoot through the dirt when we planted them eventually later on. After placing them in the peat moss, we would wrap them in tin foil, number them by which tree they came from, and place them in a freezer to simulate the weather conditions and temperature of winter. The seeds would not germinate if they weren't frozen first, so that's why we have to put them in a temper-controlled freezer.
Hi, I'm Lewis.
I'm Ian.
All right, so now that we've harvested the seeds, they're germinated, everything's great. We can't just plant them in the ground yet, because we would probably lose them and it just wouldn't be a fun time. So we had to build a grow box. We took one frame, a second frame, put it down a tarp, and put them inside each other. Now, then we took milk cartons and juice cartons, cut them in half, so then we could put the seeds along with some dirt, watering them every week with a grow light up top to allow them to grow. Once they got to a certain height, we were able to bring them outside. And now this is where the research orchard comes in. So we had to plan the research orchard so no tree with the same parent tree were next to each other. Then we went out during the day with the 7th graders and planted them. Some of the other science classes came out and we all planted them around here, right out front of the junior high. Anything else to add?
I guess I'm just moral support.
Hi, I'm Dan, and so this is where we do our work. This is on Mount Ella, and so we have the soccer fields that a lot of kids come to practice when we're there, when we show up. And so we come on the red trail, and right here is about 10 acres of land, and it was provided to us by the Parks and Rec. So this is where we do all of our bagging, and this is where Mr. Green found all those chestnut trees. And so yeah, we clear brush, and a lot of brush. There's a lot of work. We bag and we pollinate the trees. And that's basically it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sydney, and this is Ian. So cutting the other non-chestnut trees down is necessary because it ensures that nothing is blocking the sunlight making its way from the sky directly to the frowning chestnut trees.
When cutting, there are teams of 3 individuals, each with their own tool. The tools are saws, loppers, and pruning shears. A saw is used to cut down larger trees or bigger pieces of the tree. Loppers are used to cut down bigger chunks of the tree, and the pruning shears are used to cut down smaller chunks of the tree.
Once we are done cutting, we take the chunks and spread them out so they can decompose faster than if we left a whole tree to decompose. It will also ensure a prettier forest scene when we're done for the day.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Kylie, and as you can see in these pictures, we have planted hybrid trees at Flynt Park, which are a Chinese and American chestnut tree. We did do this last year, but unfortunately the trees did die of an unknown reason. This year, we did plant 3 2-year-old hybrid trees, which are the best blight-resistant chestnut tree we have at the moment from the Chestnut Foundation. We hope to have a tree that is more suited to the environment and one that will have a better surviving rate by using Massachusetts genes in the future. We also have put metal fences around the trees to protect them from any animals. When we go to Flynt Park, we check on the trees for any growth and if they need any water. Our goal is to have these hybrid trees start pollinating pure American chestnut trees and to have a blight-resistant chestnut forest at Flynt Park once again.
I'm Lois Melican, and as president of the Massachusetts chapter of the American Chestnut Foundation, one of my main functions is outreach and education. So this was really an incredible opportunity for that. And it's funny because our partnerships always develop in strange ways. Sometimes it's little things here and there or long-time acquaintances. But anyway, this was pretty interesting because I had gotten a call from the vice president of the West Virginia chapter who was working at the Eco Challenge, and he said, geez, I met a dentist from Monson, Mass, who he does a lot of Boy Scout work. He's a leader in the Boy Scout facilities in Massachusetts, and he works out of a camp called the Moses Reservation in, I can't even tell you the town, it's in Western Mass. What is it? Okay, Russell, Massachusetts, yeah. And he said they have chestnut trees there and they have chestnut cabins. So, of course, I got in touch with this guy, and it was Dr. Scannell. You probably all know Dr. Scannell from Monson. And he said, come on out, and we talked. And actually, Jesse and his family came out with us, and we talked to him. And he said, we're going to be having an Eco Challenge in a couple months. Would you guys be interested in having a booth? So we said, sure. So it was kind of a natural that the kids would do this. And I do a lot of tabling at different events, but I'll tell you, this was absolutely the best event ever because these kids really had it covered. They had all kinds of different stations, and all the people that participated were really interested in the project rather than just me and my husband standing there like handing out brochures. So it really went well, and everybody had a really a good time. And another of the outreach events was, I guess, the United Way called Jesse or called the school, Tantasqua Junior High School, and said, is there any way that we can do anything for your school? Do you have any kind of work to be done? So Jesse immediately said, sure, we can put you to work in the Chestnut Foundation. So actually the kids were teaching the people that were the volunteers, and they did a lot of weeding, and at the end of the day, they ended up planting like hundreds of daffodils, which just went by. So that was really, really beautiful. So it was another good opportunity. And this one, I didn't go to this, but this sounds like really a lot of fun. This was Kristen's project. She, as a former volunteer at Meadow Brook Wildlife Sanctuary, Audubon Sanctuary in Worcester, they called her up and said, you know, do we want to be part of our Halloween night? So these kids got dressed up with Ian as the blight, and the rest of the kids were chestnut trees, and they stood out in the woods, and they kind of hit on people coming by. So it was really good, and again, all these kids had a great time. So a lot of this is about learning a lot about chestnuts and doing good things, but it's also about having fun, and this was one of the fun nights, I guess. And one thing I do want to say, I have to say a little bit about Mr. Flynt. You guys are so lucky to have someone like that in your town who did so many things. I mean, a lot of the pillars that this town is built on was Mr. Flynt, including Flynt Park. You know, he is the person who donated the park to the town. And we are so thankful to the people of Monson for allowing us to, you know, use this area for our project, because it's really a good area. Our plans, you know, well, you saw the whole program. I mean, the end part of the whole Chestnut Foundation's restoration efforts are to bring the trees back into the wildlife. So reforestation is a huge part of our project that most people haven't even gotten to yet. You know, like Jesse said, most of the people that are doing this work like now are scientists or they're college people, but nobody at this level is doing this kind of work, especially the reforestation part, which is really kind of interesting. So the whole idea is to open up the area so that we can have the chestnut trees will get sunlight, and if the chestnut trees get sunlight, they will grow. And we're also discovering, you know, just to get a feel for the terrain. It's such a beautiful park. You guys are so lucky, and it's managed so well. It's you know, conservation and recreation is kind of a hard balance sometimes in a park, but I think you guys really have it nailed in this town, because it's ball fields and it's, you know, athletic activities. It's a playground, and I know it's going to be a disc golf, but it's also, you've got this great forest at the top of your hill, or you had a great forest at the top of your hill. And I think the idea is to bring that chestnut forest back. I know up there's like low bush blueberries all over the place, and sweet fern, which is interesting. The only time I've seen as much sweet fern is on Mount Wachusett. It's definitely a mountain shrub, not really all that common. And this is something that we just discovered 2 weeks ago. This is called Rhododendron perniphyllum, and it's actually on the cover of this month's, of the spring volume of the American Rhododendron Society magazine. And it's a native azalea, and I think there's a lot of them up on that area. And again, as we cut down all the brush and stuff around it, these beautiful azaleas are sort of coming through. So it kind of made me think about, you know, the American Chestnut Foundation's mission is to restore an American chestnut back to the eastern forest, but this takes so many. There's so many different steps to it, and this is just another like branch, if you want to call it that. And it just made me realize about all the silver linings. You know, this is just an incredible thing. The chestnut restoration benefits everyone and every living thing, and most importantly, it's a sure sign of hope that people can come together and solve problems, right wrongs, and protect what we must. One thing we have learned is that if you have a really good cause and you know, do the work and involve young people, most likely you will succeed. So we are inviting you to join our project in any way that you would choose to. I mean, I think the kids are going to be doing like a story walk for children at the park in July. And we kind of want to get more people in Monson involved. This is a great project, and we'd like to hear what you'd like to do, because essentially, as I said, nobody's doing this right now. These kids are writing the book. So, you know, and it takes teachers. I have to say something about Jesse and Kristen and Cassie. If it wasn't for teachers like that, this would not happen. You know, they're the people that are really kind of leading the way. Thank you. And so afterwards, if there's any questions, I'm sure some of the kids can probably ask you. These kids know more than 80% of the people I know about chestnuts, so they can probably answer your questions. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for coming to our presentation. I hope that you learned a lot, and if there's any way that, or you think you might want to be interested someday in joining up with us and doing something, then I would love it if you contacted us, and we're going to start to build a list of people, not just from Monson, but from anywhere, who are outside of our school who want to be involved in some way. We kind of envision at some point we could have work parties that do things with Chestnut area management up on the hill, because that's a huge labor-intensive project up there. And there's many other things that we could do, lead hikes and show people things. And so if you're interested, just contact us by email, and I'll quickly get some information up there. I think we neglected this part of the presentation, but we want you to contact us. So if you are so inclined, then we hope you do. So thank you very much.